People tend to read differently online than they would do offline. Each chapter in this course focuses on one of the differences between online and offline reading and describes how you can use it to make your writing more appealing to an online audience. The concepts we cover will be useful to you whether you're writing content for an e-commerce site, an internet, or a newsletter. It doesn't matter whether you're describing a product or a service, updating readers with the latest news, writing your company's About Us page, or creating unique reference material. By the end of this course, you'll see how it's possible to write 50% less text and still get your point across just as clearly. Why it is better to give away the punchline in the first paragraph, and how encouraging people to check out other sites might make them more likely to come back to yours. Those are just a few of the topics we'll cover, and for each one, we'll give you a chance to practice what you have just learned with optional exercises. There are lots of interesting concepts to talk about, so let's get started. If you look at the research that's been done into how people interact with online content, you'll discover some interesting reading behaviors that are very different from how we like to read things like novels in the real world. It all boils down to one key point. Online, people aren't normally reading for pleasure. Instead, they almost always look for a specific piece of information, and they don't want extraneous junk to get in their way. When you watch people reading online, you'll see some very distinct behaviors. Each one of these behaviors suggests something about how you should write online. People scan rather than read everything, so they need good signposts. Formal text is harder to read, so it's important to choose the correct reading age and tone. Visitors look for information-rich content. They don't like being teased. You need to tell them upfront what's in it for them in your writing. Readers lose interest in a page quickly, so put the key facts at the beginning of your content. Marketing speak and jargon turn people off. Removing the sales pitch can actually keep them engaged longer. People respect authoritative sources, so it's good to link out to other people's content. People look for supporting evidences too. That means providing detailed information, testimonials, and useful images that help them make a decision. Readers are wary of out-of-date content, so it's important to actively manage the information you publish. This is true for people shopping online who need prices, specifications, and the confidence to make a purchase. It's true for people doing research for a project, whether it's information for a home improvement job or a school assignment. It's also true for people trying to find a service, such as a cab ride or a cute baby video. We do use the web for entertainment as well. But even then, the act of finding something to read or watch requires a degree of research. Otherwise, how else are you going to find the absolute best cat videos out there? Each chapter of this course will cover the points I made above in more detail, describing how best you can write for this impatient, research-driven audience. Because people tend to be in research mode rather than entertainment mode when they are reading online, They normally only read about 20% of the content on an average page. That's because they're skimming for information they think is relevant to the problem they are trying to solve. As an example of this skimming behavior, did you catch the problem with the sentence on the screen? Did you see it first time you looked, or only when you had started paying attention? We really do just skim across most text. As a result, we can miss information if it isn't really apparent. You need to design your online text with this behavior in mind. Start each paragraph with the key idea, using words that will tell the story for the rest of the paragraph. These words are the ones that people's eyes rest on when they are skimming, so they should really indicate what the rest of the paragraph is about. If your paragraphs run on too long or contain more than one concept, then readers might completely miss the subsequent ideas that you have buried in the paragraph. The best way to avoid this problem is to use short words, short sentences, and short paragraphs. This technique forces you to think about the simplest, cleanest, and shortest way to get your message across. Your text can start to look a little ragged if you follow this suggestion and you're covering several different ideas in the same article. Sometimes that's okay. For instance, news websites often use this approach and their content is still very legible. Often though, you'll find that the best alternative in this situation is to convert part of your content into a list. Lists are easier to scan, are written telegraphically, and break up text. For that reason, it makes sense to use lists whenever you can in your online text. Now I want you to work with the text in the first exercise file called Chapter 1 50%. This text is the introductory column in a newsletter. It doesn't matter that you aren't familiar with the topic. In fact, it probably helps that you aren't, because you'll approach it with a more open mind. For this type of editing work, you'll probably find it easiest to print the exercise file and work from a paper copy. What I'd like you to do is show what edits you'd make to this text with fast reading in mind. In other words, think about making the text shorter by removing words that don't need to be there and making sure that each paragraph only contains one idea. Also, when it makes sense, turn the text into lists so that the content is easier to scan. Now, I don't want you to perform a rewrite. Instead, I want you to mark up the text to show what changes you'd make given more time. The way I suggest you to do is to first read the whole text through. Then, circle or highlight what you think is the key idea. Also, cross through unnecessary text. Use a vertical line to show where you'd split a long sentence in two. Use a double vertical line to show where you'd split a long paragraph. Underline words that are too big or confusing, which you'd want to find an alternative for. And show where you would create a list by using a bullet dot at the beginning of each list item. This is a relatively long piece of text and you'll be reading through it at least twice. So I suggest you spend around 10 minutes on this exercise. Open the file now and work through the text. Next, we'll discuss the types of changes you might have. Now that you've had a chance to work through the exercise file, I'm going to show you my edits. Remember though that there are many different ways that you could have changed the text to make it more legible for an online audience. Follow along and see if you made similar changes. You might think that using big words is a great way to impress your audience, but that misses a major point. People don't care to find out how large your vocabulary is. Instead, they just want to read and understand the information that you are providing. Even if people can read at a higher reading level, they find it easier to read simple text. What this means is, you should write for a 5th grade reading level in your summaries, an 8th grade in the majority of your content, and a maximum of 11th grade in accompanying literature. Those grade levels correspond to the reading age of around 11, 14 and 18. This is about the age of children in the last year of grade school, middle school and high school. But there are also a lot of individuals who just don't have the skills to read at a high reading level. A US government survey found that 14% of US adults are functionally illiterate, and another 29% have only basic reading skills, enough to perform simple everyday literary activities. 44% can perform moderately challenging literacy activities, and only 13% are proficient enough to do complex and challenging activities. Formal text is hard to read. It turns people off. If you use words that people don't use in everyday conversation, your readers have to work harder to understand what you are trying to say. Some readers won't bother to do this work, or they might get scared away by what they consider to be legal terminology, so they'll miss your message. There are 2 things you can do to make your text seem less formal without resorting to colloquial expressions. The first one is to write as if you're speaking directly to your audience. And the second is to write in the active rather than the passive voice. It's easy to write as if you were speaking. In fact, I find it harder to make my writing more formal than I do when I write in a conversational tone. So why do people write in a stilted formal manner? Maybe they want to be taken more seriously, and they think that using legalese or jargon will help that. Maybe they're embarrassed about the message they have to get across, so they want to hide it behind big words. The thing is, even lawyers don't use this type of language when they're talking amongst themselves. So why would you? To be taken seriously, show your credibility by referencing other sources and writing authoritatively. To deal with difficult messages, set the right tone and explain the reason for your actions. Neither situation requires excessively obfuscated text. I mean lots of confusing words. The easiest way to get people to do things for you is to form a good relationship or rapport with them. To do this, address the reader directly by saying you rather than customers or members of the public, which immediately makes readers think that you've put yourself in a different category from them. Also, take ownership. Say I or we rather than just using your company name. Companies can often appear to be faceless entities, whereas using I or we makes it clear that a person is talking. In this example, replacing our company with we and individuals with you also forces you to write the rest of the sentence in a more active way. Writing in the first person makes things sound more active. It also makes it easier to say things concisely. Passive text doesn't encourage readers to take ownership or follow calls to action. By using I or we, you can use simple verb forms and it's clear who has taken action. If you try and remove yourself from the sentence, you have to use convoluted sentence structures and the end result is often passive rather than active. Another place that active text is important is if you are giving people instructions or suggesting a course of action. The formal way of doing this would be to refer to people in the third person, users of this product or customers. Obviously, there's a big possibility that readers won't understand that you're referring to them when you're being so obtuse. Instead, be active. Talk directly to your audience to make it clear what you want them to do. For now, just focus on the piece of text. What I want you to do is count the number of sentences and the number of syllables in the chunk of text. I've already marked out exactly 100 words. So you'll notice there'll be a fractional sentence. I normally count to the nearest tenth of a sentence. To count the syllabus, say each word out loud and count on your fingers the number of emphasis points. For example, in the word emphasis, it has 3 syllables. Em-pha-sis. A number like 49% has 5 syllables. For T9%. It's easier to tally the syllables at the end of each line and then total them up at the end. Otherwise, you'll quickly run out of fingers to count on. Once you have your fingers for the number of sentences and the number of syllables, you can plot them on this graph and work out the reading level for the text. The reading level corresponds to the American grade system. So, 8 means somewhere in an 8th grade education, about 14 years old. 12 means something with a full high school education, about 18 years old. 16 would mean with a full university education. So, to sum up, first find a 100-word segment of the text, and I already highlighted this for you. Next, count the number of sentences, then the number of syllables. Once you have these two numbers, plot them on the graph to get the reading age of the text. Go ahead and take about 5 to 7 minutes to do this now. Next, we'll discuss what this means. Online, just like in real life, your visitors use signposts to point them in the right direction. Obviously, we don't often find actual signposts online, but certain types of text can easily serve the same purpose. Often, the best signposts are headings, subheadings, article summaries, and linked texts. People read online content in an F-shaped pattern. They start by reading across the top of the page content. Then they scan down the left-hand side of the page, moving in across the page from time to time to read things that catch their eye. The things that catch their attention are signpost text, the information that stands out. Obviously, because of the way they are formatted, headings, summaries, and linked text all have the ability to be good signposts. Of course, it's up to you to use good text in these locations in order to make the signpost text truly useful. Page headings. That is, headline text should describe what type of content people will find on the page. Good headlines should sum up the content in just a couple of words. Remember that headline text may well be seen by users on its own, separated from the content. For instance, in lists of similar articles. Writing informative headlines doesn't stop people from clicking through to read more. Instead, it lets people know that they're in the right place and encourages them to learn more details. Teaser headlines do just the opposite, hiding the content and expecting people to click through to read. Obviously, people do click on teaser headlines, otherwise they wouldn't be so popular online. However, there's growing frustration with teaser clickbait, as it's called. These headlines might be great for bored, entertainment-driven web surfers. But if you have a commercial or charitable online presence, your job is to connect your visitors with the information they want as quickly as possible. Within an article, it's important to make sure that you give readers a reason to care. Why should they buy your product, use your service, contribute to your charity, or follow the advice that you're giving? At heart, most people really do care about what's in it for them. You might think that you've covered that by talking about features or benefits, but you have to remember that your readers aren't the same type of people as you are. They aren't intimately familiar with your product or service, so they'll need some help understanding what you offer fits with their need. It's important that you know who your visitors are and what type of questions they're likely to have when they read your content. What's in it for them will differ depending upon the type of content you are producing. A product description might help people visualize how trendy they'll look in your clothes, how special they'll feel driving your car, or how wonderfully tingly their taste buds will be after eating your food. These are what's known as aspirational properties of your product. People aspire to be trendy, special, and tingly. You're showing how your product helps them get there, or the benefits might just be as simple as saving them time or money or helping them get a good job done more easily. It's time for another exercise. Find the exercise file called Chapter 3 Signposts. In it, you'll see that there are two pieces of text. Each is a short article. In this exercise, I'd like you to rewrite the text in the headline, body, and linked text for those two articles. Make sure that the headline and linked text provide good signposts telling people what's in the article or what they'll get if they click. Also, make sure that the body text has a good indication of what's in it for the reader to help their interest and encourage them to act. The articles are both very short, so it should take you around 5 to 10 minutes to perform the rewrite. When you're done, you'll have a chance to compare your edits to the changes I have made to the text. Reading a novel wouldn't always be much fun if the author gave away the ending in the first paragraph, isn't it? However, online, that's exactly what you want to do. This way, your readers will know they found the article that they need and continue on to get the details, or they'll realize quickly that they are in the wrong place and thank you for not wasting their time. Online readers lose interest with a piece of text very quickly. If you look at a heat map of the amount of gaze time people spend on different parts of an article, you'll notice that the further down the page you get, the less they are paying attention. So, it makes sense to give a summary of the important information at the very beginning, and then expand on the information piece by piece through the rest of the article. We're up to exercise number 4, called Chapter 4 Inverted Pyramid. In the exercise file, you'll find a piece of text that follows a relatively traditional format describing events in the order in which they happen. I'd like you to reorganize the information so that it follows the inverted pyramid style, with a summary of the most important information appearing first and then subsequent paragraphs giving progressively more detail. My suggestion is to first read through the article and then work out what the key points are. Find a way of summarizing those and then work from the summary to decide which points to expand on and in which order. You may decide that you need to rewrite some sentences, but for this exercise, I'm more concerned about the order of the information than I am about the absolute words that you use. Take 10 minutes now to rearrange the article contents in the inverted pyramid format, then we can compare notes. When you read most marketing or public relations articles, you'll see that really isn't much information. Instead, there's typically a lot of hyperbole, words and phrases that sound impressive but don't add facts. Now, there's probably a time and a place for that type of content. But for readers who are just trying to compare two products or services, the additional fluff gets in the way. Statements of fact help in decision making. Hype clouds the issue. Hype is more likely to frustrate without adding much to the conversation. Really, marketing speak says, I believe you're an idiot who can't tell fact from fiction. Another type of jargon is industry-specific words. It's okay to use these words in places where you know that every reader will be familiar with them. It's not okay to use them in places where you might have a mixed audience. For instance, people in the purchasing department of a large organization might have no clue what they are purchasing for a certain group in the organization. All they know that is what specifications it must meet. If your site uses jargon rather than easily understandable terms to describe the product's characteristics, those purchasing people may just move on to the next company. In another example, it might be okay to use some industry terms when talking with cardiac surgeons, but not so when you are creating information for patients who are suffering heart problems. Those individuals need clear descriptions and instructions in order to understand and treat their medical condition. It might be important to use the industry terms so that you sound credible, but that shouldn't be at the expense of your other visitors. Try to always follow any industry jargon with a more general description. You might be worried about losing customers if you send them off to another site. For instance, a manufacturer's specification page or a client's site where they talk about your work. There are two reasons why this tactic actually works. First, if you have sufficiently valuable content, visitors will come back to you time and time again because you're a useful resource to them. Secondly, you can't trap visitors on your site, and they'll be searching for this type of secondary information anyway. By defining the links that you expect people might want, you get to control which specific pieces of secondary information they see. When you link out, you're making a statement about how confident you are in the content that people will find when they follow the link. So, long as you only link to sites which have good credibility, your visitors will come to see your site as a valuable source of information. This is also a good place to discuss the images you use on your site. There are lots of places where you can purchase stock photography of happy, smiling people pointing at laptop screens or presenting sales figure graphs or writing on glass walls. But none of these images actually convey any useful information about the product or service that you're offering or about the topic you're writing on. And tell me, why is the writing on the glass wall always your way around even though the person is writing from the other side? That's just cheesy. Instead of using these stock images, it's worth taking the time to find pictures that help tell your story. Pictures should give perspective to written descriptions that you have included in your article. They should support and enhance the article content. A good picture will quickly help a visitor to your site work out whether they are on the right page or not. And good pictures can often help people understand a concept that they couldn't grasp from the text alone. Content expires. Even articles you wrote 6 months ago can be rendered pointless by small changes. For instance, if you run a travel site, there's no point raving about the natural beauty of a national park if it's just been hit by wildfires. In the case where something major has happened that requires you to make a change to the content, it's often okay to keep the original information on the page but to add a prominent notice at the top of the page describing what the change is, when it happened, and if necessary, providing links to the updated information. Sometimes though, it's dangerous to keep out-of-date content around. For instance, assembly instructions for a product after it's been through a safety recall, driving directions when a road layout changes, or tourist tips for the capital city of a country that's just undergone a violent coup. So, what should you do? The best plan is to set an expiration date for each article at the time you write it. Doing this while the content is fresh in your mind means that you don't have to spend so much time doing article pruning later on. I suggest that, depending from the type of content you produce, the expiration date you set should be somewhere between 6 and 12 months in the future.